Welcome to The World Today. I'm Waqas Majeed Khan. Today we're talking about a very important topic which concerns our society also, but it concerns the entire world. And that issue is women's role in politics. We've seen recently that women have been targeted by vile propaganda against them. Why some politicians stoop to attacking women's morality, women's role in the public spaces, and changing society's behavior towards women is what we'll be talking about. We'll also talk about sexual harassment at the workplace. We'll talk about what needs to be done in terms of enacting and implementing laws. Of course, there are laws to protect women, but how are they implemented? We'll talk about that. And we'll also talk about educating society on what sexual harassment really is and the role of the government in protecting the victims. Now, let's begin the conversation. I'd like to introduce my guests in the studio. Joining me for this conversation today, we have Rehan. He's a lawyer, and we have Mona Alam, who's a journalist. Thank you very much for being here. Rehan, I'll start with you. First of all, are there laws in Pakistan which protect women when it comes to sexual harassment, and are they effective laws?
Absolutely. We've got, I think the legal framework is very efficient on this issue. And we've got some laws here which have been amended over, with the passage of time, and they're quite good. But the problem here in our society is mainly towards their implementation and, the general approach which people have towards it, that if a woman is being harassed, she is usually discouraged from raising the issue on any other forum. And usually, people just tell her to just play it down and not to create an issue out of it. So that's where the issue lies. Otherwise, I believe that our laws are pretty good.
All right, we'll come to that aspect later on. Mona, what do you think about the women's role in politics? And also, do you think that women have access to public spaces the way men do in this country? And if not, then what do you think is the real problem here?
Right, thanks Waqas. Absolutely right. There's no openness in terms of the access women have to any sort of public place in Pakistan, and I don't think that's a Pakistan specific problem. Let's be very fair on that too, because the problem also extends to Bangladesh and probably this entire South Asian region that we're in. So I think it's a problem which goes beyond Pakistan. It goes to the entire region, which is an affectee to this issue. But having said that, yes, there needs a lot of homework on that front, and for public spaces, for access to women, and for, women have made up more than 50% of the population here in Pakistan. So that itself speaks volumes about how essential and how necessary they are to be put in the workforce, to be put in our political force. And Pakistan also, Waqas, is accredited for the first woman prime minister of not just Pakistan but to the entire Muslim world. So I think Pakistan is relatively better in that context. But having said that, I think whatever that we are talking about, you've mentioned in your preamble how women are being victimized, how women are being targeted. Certainly not. They're not being given that limit and that extent of freedom in our public spaces and even in our revolutionized workplaces, which are taken modern relatively in comparison to the others. There is a problem. We've identified that, and I think many of us have. But we also need to identify that it is a lesser problem as compared to the one existing in the entire region. Say for India, as a matter of fact, it happens to be the rape capital of Delhi, rather, the capital of India. That happens to be the rape capital of the entire region and the entire world. Such are the statistics. So Pakistan, obviously, we need to catch up, we need to cope up, but we are far better than others in the South Asian region. Alhamdulillah, for that matter of fact. But then again, Islam teaches all about liberalization of women, and there are so many aspects to it. It is the only religion in the world that has given
equality.
Equality. It talks about equality, it talks about equity for women, and it brings them in par with the other gender, that is the male gender. So I think only if we apply those principles in full throttle in the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, we'd be better than none.
All right, let's begin with the definition of what sexual harassment is according to the law. So Rehan, if you could just give us a brief definition of what entails sexual harassment, let's say at the workplace.
Well, it's quite a broad definition which we have in our laws. Like there's this there's this act of workplace harassment at workplace 2010. If you go by that, it is mentioned that there, it's quite a broad one which mentions harassment in such a way that if someone enjoys a higher authority than the other woman colleague of his, and he tries to exploit it by somehow, pressurizing her or giving her an incentive, in such a way which can pressurize her into doing something which she doesn't want to, that would also fall into this ambit. Similarly, in Pakistan Penal Code, which is the law which deals with the criminal aspect of this, even if it's section 509 which deals with it, and that mentions that if any person intends to insult the modesty of any woman by even uttering any word or making any gesture, or any innuendo or any such gesture which can actually intimidate her or actually be construed in such a way that he's trying to actually impose himself on her, or he's actually pressurizing her into doing something like that. That is also construed. That is also
So do you think that the
taken as
definition in the law in Pakistan is an adequate definition, or do you think
Yes.
that there is a lot of, as you also said, that it's a broad definition? So do you think that it might also venture into the realm of being a vague definition, and therefore there are many things that may not really be sexual harassment but are considered sexual because of the
exactly
vagueness of the law itself?
Exactly. Like, I'll just give you an example. There's like, this thing is also considered as harassment if you create a hostile environment in the office. If someone is in charge and he creates a hostile environment, now that is also at times, that is also like something which goes to, like, if a person doesn't even intend to do any such thing but he creates such an environment unconsciously, that can also be taken as harassment even if he doesn't intend to. So that I do agree with you on that it is such a broad definition that it can be interpreted as such by by the victim.
So don't you think that definition of harassment needs to be revisited? Saner heads need to sit down together to chalk out a way forward. Mona, what's your opinion on this?
Very true. Thank you for pointing that out, rather. And Rehan has rightly mentioned that it's a very broader context. We've also been talking about it off air right before we began. It is a broader context, and that eventually leads to manipulation of that too. So you see, both the genders are responsible towards interpreting this entire notion. And this Me Too, #MeToo movement, we've also talked about that right before we started off with this. That too, I think, is not a fashion statement. We need to be very clear on our concepts. If there is a sexual harassment, if there has ever been a sexual advancement towards a woman or towards a lady, there are relevant fora for that matter. For the legal pertinence of the fact, Rehan has talked about how comprehensive or how broad this law or that definition makes sexual harassment. But then we've also seen the era of Hudud ordinance, when the complainant herself would be questioned upon why is she complaining, and as to why has she come forward with such a vulgar and such an obscure statement. So you see, it is more or less a taboo still in Pakistan.
That's a very good point you raised, because I wanted to bring that up. When we talk about in law, if a woman accuses a man of rape, we ask for 4 witnesses, and then there is how does that work out?
And it's near impossible to prove.
Then we also have the issue of maybe not allowing genetic or DNA testing as evidence in certain cases. Are these problems that you come up with or you face in your daily dealings with sexual harassment cases?
Well, now, these 4 witnesses requirement and all this was something, when Hudud ordinance was active. It's not there anymore. Now even DNA test is very much, admissible in the court. It's not like that.
All right.
But
so we want you to clarify that.
Yeah, I would want to say one thing. You just mentioned that don't we need to revisit the definition? There are some things which are not in black and white. Now this thing, whether what constitutes sexual harassment, you can't actually put it in black and white. It's a gray area.
It's a gray area.
So in that way, I would say that, and yes, it is being manipulated also. Like, I'll just give you an example. In one of the government offices, without mentioning a name, a woman accused her boss for sexual harassment. So a committee was formed. When she was asked why she had accused, she said that I don't have fan in my office. They said, so where does the sexual harassment thing come in? She said, well, the issue is that since the fan is not here, so maybe he's trying to pressurize me to come up to him and ask for a favor, and so he can just start it from there. Now,
Ridiculous.
no, this happens. It's not being taken in the right stride. So in that way, I would say that as for the other thing which you just mentioned about, that was actually, I hate to say it, but whatever the requirement of 4 witnesses and all, that was in past and that is no more there. And thank God, but because that was on towards another extreme.
Right.
Because obviously you can't afford to have 4 witnesses at that time
At
and
that
all
time,
that.
yeah.
Just hold that thought. We've been joined by Barrister Masroor Shah for his comments. Shah Sahab, we're talking about sexual harassment at the workplace. Do you think that the laws that are in Pakistan are adequate in protecting the sanctity of the workplace when it comes to women's protection, or do you think that there is still some room for improvement in the laws?
Well, in Pakistan, the lack of existence of laws was never a problem. Even now, our statute book is replete with laws that tend to or are contemplated to curb the menace of sexual harassment at workplace. But the problem is its implementation. I mean, for example, take the example of the 2010 Act, the Protection of Women from Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act 2010. I mean, it's a very well-drafted law, but the problem is that it is not implemented on ground. For example, Section 3 of this Act categorically enunciates and it ordains upon all the organizations in the country to set up an inquiry committee which must comprise of at least one female member from within the organization, so that if there are any complaints by a victim, by a woman who is sexually harassed, then it should be adequately investigated into. And the inquiry committee is vested with a lot of powers. It can inflict the minor punishment, it can inflict the major punishment, even dismissal from the office, and can even impose fines. But the problem is that if you look into the record of the organizations, hardly, again I would say, hardly any organization has set up the inquiry committee. They don't even know about the existence of this law. I mean, I was having a discussion with some female parliamentarians on another TV channel, and I told them that, look, how can you enforce it in other organizations when Parliament does not have a sexual harassment committee for protecting women regarding sexual harassment claims by the parliamentarians themselves? Look what happened to Aisha Gulalai. I don't know whether the complaint was genuine, was bona fide or wrong, but at least it could have been investigated. Similarly, you see the women on the floor of the Singh assembly, they are being ridiculed, they are being sexually harassed, but there is no forum. So, main thing is that is pivotal is that if you really want this law to come to the rescue of the women in the country, to come and protect the women, then the protection that is provided by Section 3, that is setting up of the inquiry committees, this process must be completed, and then of course the law will itself be set in motion. Second aspect is that these things, these types of social menaces, it cannot be curtailed, cannot be properly countered by way of legislation only. We need to change the thinking of our people as well.
Absolutely. Barrister Saab, I wanted to ask you this question regarding what we recently witnessed in certain political rallies. We've seen women participating wholeheartedly, and then there are politicians who come and they pass comments and judgments on the behavior of women, and they basically target women for vile propaganda just for being part of the political process. What are your views on that?
I mean, that's very unfortunate because the parliamentarians and our political leaders, they are supposed to be the role models for the society. And if we see a minister or a parliamentarian harassing women, ridiculing women in such an absurd manner, what example are we setting for the other organizations and for the other people of this country? So it is high time that even in the parliament there should be a committee, because parliament is an organization, political party is an organization. It definitely comes in the ambit of the definition of an organization enunciated by the 2010 Act. And unless we set an example at the top, this thing would not have trigger effect, and people in the other organizations, in the private sectors, and this is so rampant. Whether you take the legal profession, the media industry, you have seen Misha Shafi's claim against Ali Zafar, the sports arena, we have seen even there was a girl called Halima. She, poor girl, had to commit suicide because his plea of sexual harassment was not heard at the right forum. So it's high time that the political leaders set an example, and then the others would emulate this example by themselves.
Thank you very much, Barrister Masroor Shah, for taking out the time and sharing your views with PTV World. Coming back to the studio, Mona, you heard what Barrister Saab said. Let's talk about that incident. It's not just one isolated incident, because we've seen over the past 4 or 5 years, on a number of occasions, women have been targeted for participating in political rallies or being, trying to be more of a public figure. There is a complete imbalance when you see the number of men that are representing the people of Pakistan when you compare that to the number of women. So there is a problem somewhere. So what do you think is the real issue over here?
You know, it's ironical and it's ugly ridiculous that women participating in one's own rally, in one's own political rally, are considered to be liberal, they're considered to be open-minded, they're considered democratic and a part of the democratic process. But the ones participating in your opponent's rally are considered vulgar, indecent, inappropriate, and from God-forsaken bad families or bad reputes. So you see, it's such irony, and it's such chauvinism in this statement itself. It's a general code of conduct. It's a general modus operandi for politicians in Pakistan. I don't know where they come from when they advocate such things. And even in these political rallies, I wouldn't name the party, but there were some videos and some footages circulating on social media where women participating in those rallies were actually physically assaulted and they were molested by the male participants of the rally. And those footages, those videos were doing rounds. The political party leader actually took an initiative. They came and they were like, okay, we'll take this case up and we'll lodge an FIR against the harassers and whatnot. But then again, those molesters are free as we speak. Nothing had been done. There are cases when we look at these things, there are video evidences, there are footages. I don't know, Rehan would shed light upon that better, if video footages are even taken admissible as a legal evidence to this fact. So I think he would rather shed light better upon that matter. But only what I know as a matter of fact is that even this federal ombudsman, this ombudsperson, Kashmala Tariq, just a few weeks ago, rather a month back, on Women's Day, ironically, she was the one who came forward and who actually felt that she was being sexually assaulted in a manner that she was being instigated. Her character was being assassinated by a journalist who came in her office to interview her. So it's just irony as we speak all over.
Unbelievable.
I would want to say one thing on this.
Please.
You see, we live in a patriarchal society, and generally what people think, what a common man thinks is that for any woman, any woman is a symbol of respect and pride in any family, for any family head, or for any group head, or for any party head even. So they are actually, what I feel is that by using these words, they actually discourage the women from progressing further in what they are doing. And like whatever we are, this incident, whatever this, Rana Sanaullah said, he, in a way, I think he's actually trying to, discourage the women from going to the rally again. And he's trying to convey a message to Imran Khan that, see, because like I said, women happen to be a symbol of respect in this society, for any, in any society, for any family, for any party. So he's trying to actually hit it on Imran Khan that, see, I can even stoop so low to get to you. So this is, so
using women or using the shoulder of women to make some other kind of a point.
Exactly.
That is also a common refrain over here.
Yes.
That is, women are used in that way by many others, not just politicians.
But it's two-way traffic, Waqas. It happens from everyone's end. Just as Rehan spoke of Rana Sanaullah, yes, those were obnoxious comments. But then again, same has been the case when Aisha Gulalai had levelled allegations upon Imran Khan, the PTI chief, and none other than the Prime Minister of Pakistan had asked for a parliamentary committee to be constituted on the matter and to take things on board. But then we never heard of it. It was just lost in the wind. And even Rehan Khan, right after her divorce, there were allegations put up against her that you've been taking up someone else's agenda and you've been paid, you've been hired by, I don't know, non-state actors to marry Imran Khan and whatnot. So PTI had been naming and shaming her over and over again. Eventually, she just left the country, and then I just heard she's been penning those matters down in her autobiography.
She's coming up with a book.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah,
see
her
what's
biography.
revealed in that book.
Yeah,
I'd be
that's
very
worth a
interested
watch.
to read it.
Yeah.
So,
And you see, these are actually the things like in Aisha Gulale's issue also, if you see, before it was even, before people even thought as to what had happened, they started to name and shame her and say that she's an opportunist who was looking for something more which she didn't get from.
ticket, yeah.
Yeah,
and all
that's
that.
a very strange phenomena, and that is something that I witnessed on social media,
Yeah.
that there were a number of women who were actually blaming the victim. There were a number of women who were attacking the women who had come
Even
up.
for this Ali Zafar
yeah.
Nisha Shafi controversy,
Yeah.
Again, yeah, we
without
have-
even ascertaining what the
Yeah.
facts are,
Yeah, I
they
mean,
are-
yeah, sorry. Please.
yeah, they're very direct in blaming and in shaming Misha Shafi, mostly Misha Shafi, for her dressing and for dressing up inappropriately and for carrying herself out inappropriately. I don't think that's the criteria at all. We need to grow out of this. We need to evolve out of this. And this itself begins at home.
Yeah. And Waqas Saab, I hate to say this, but some of the anchors even, I would want,
Yeah.
I wish I could name one of them who is actually hell-bent on doing so. These anchors also try to fight the case for,
Either
the
one
main
of the two.
culprit. No, the main culprit. Like I recently saw a video, he was actually, pointing towards Misha Shafi that, see, look at this video of you and Ali Zafar, this shows that there was no harassment. I mean, come on, even if it was just a video, how does he know what happened before that or after that?
And they're putting up things upon photographs too,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Which are doing rounds that, okay, they're sharing this close proximity, the two of them, so it was all with all consent of the two, and there's nothing like sexual
So,
harassment.
Mona, in our society, we have a dichotomy over here. We
Yeah.
have a schizophrenic response
Absolutely,
because,
yes.
on the one hand, we have the utmost respect for women in society as mothers and sisters and wives and daughters, but at the same time, it's the same women that are molested publicly by a number of men for whatever reasons. So, how do we balance this dichotomy? I mean, how do we deal with
Yeah.
it? How do we address this issue?
You see, it's just preposterous. Look at this Zainab's case, the Kasoor rape case, which had taken up a huge flow on the social media platforms, and it had turned out into rallies and whatnot, and it was a huge public outcry and should have been rightly so. But then again, the culprit is caught, nothing has been done. He's been sentenced multiple death rows, but I don't know when are they being implemented. And this itself is only encouraging this attitude. We've been seeing similar cases in Sindh. We've been coming across multiple cases in KPK, in Punjab as we speak. So it's a problem relevant to every other city that we're talking about, every other village, suburb, whatnot. So it's only instigating them, and it's only, I think, encouraging the culprits to do more, and they can get away with it very easily.
So what
Even
kind
when
of-
it's a suo moto from the Chief Justice of Pakistan on the matter.
What role are our educational institutions playing in changing these attitudes? Why are we not being able to teach our children to have respect for each other, whether they're a girl or a boy? They are both human beings, and as we spoke earlier, I mean, men and women are created equal, and one cannot exist
Yeah.
without the other. So why is it that women's subjugation, which is worldwide, continues even in this modern age? Are there any answers to that?
The dichotomy even exists in the educational institutions all across Pakistan, because I recall even Malala was prohibited from from discussions in school institutions, and the teachers, the principals, everyone alike in elite schools of Pakistan. Mind it, we are not talking about governmental schools who we are very habitual of putting down and treating as inferior. We are talking about elite schools who have been charging fortunes out of their parents. They are the ones who had been discouraging giving honor to Malala for all their students, and instead of putting her up as a role model for female children and for women children and also for male children.
Absolutely, for everybody.
They're rather discouraging it. They're putting up the contrary ritual to that. So you see, I think it has to come about in the social manner and in our social fabric. And before teaching our daughters, we need to teach our sons.
Absolutely, cannot argue with that there. Okay, let's talk about the role of the government in protecting victims. Rehan, many times, even if a woman plucks up the courage to go and file a case against somebody, what laws are there for the protection of those victims? Because a number of issues that exist in Pakistan, for example, acid attacks is another very serious issue. So if a girl or a woman complains about being sexually harassed, then she's also further targeted as for further mistreatment and maybe even killed in some cases. So what laws are there to protect the victims after they have come forward with their issue?
Well, I don't know about, I don't think there's any law, because in such a case, like let's say if a woman accuses someone of harassment, till the pendency of the suit, till the pendency of the case, she is...
What is the concept of witness protection? Because that is also
there's
something...
that's not here in Pakistan. No,
don't you think that we need to work on these aspects which are non-existent in Pakistan, because they need to exist to protect victims and those who have been at the receiving end of torture or mistreatment?
And what about honor killings?
Yeah, well, think of it like this, that in Pakistan, even like if you talk about the Shahzeb case, it ended in a compromise because there was no protection for the for the victim side. The father of the guy was himself very much insecure because the other were feudals who I don't know if they did
influence.
They influenced, exactly. So here also, if a woman does file a case, she needs to and if she musters up the courage to do so, there is a risk that she would be she would face further character assassination, and we need to work on this. Obviously, we need to have witness protection. We need to stop the press from even taking her name. We need to there are lots of things which need to be done. Honestly speaking, first we need to change our mindset about it.
How do we go about doing
that? I would want to say one thing. You are talking about witness protection. What about the the character assassination which she faces on social media? Who's going to protect her from that? Yeah, so that is a very big factor.
What about the social hashtag trends which are created against her, against the victim or the complainant?
Absolutely, that's my question.
Yeah, so
we have cyber laws that were enacted. There are a number of laws that exist on the books, at least.
Yeah, but there's nothing that's only in the books, or it happens once in a while that you get to hear that there has been an implementation of such laws, but it's not something, because it's so much common. Like this, any hashtag is being added to a status by more than, I think, millions of these users. So who are you going to go after one by one?
They don't even crack down on those fake accounts, for God's sake. Like, it's the very basic that could be done in that regard.
Because we have cyber protection laws.
Yeah,
there is cyber harassment as well.
Absolutely.
Sexual harassment is also in the internet realm.
Yes.
So, you can be harassed on the internet or through Facebook, through social media. Are there any laws that protect against that?
Yeah, there's Pakistan Electronic Crime Act,
right,
2016, but in that case, you see, you need to actually harass the person. Like if I am, someone who has no concern with what happened in Misha Shafi Ali Zafar case, and I just name and shame Misha Shafi or Ali Zafar on it, there's no law which actually, protects them from me. The harassment law which I'm talking about, it's actually limited to the
victim and the perpetrator.
Yeah, victim and the perpetrator.
And Rehan has talked about certain programs, TV programs, that were purposely done to shame one of the two stakeholders in this Misha Shafi and Ali Zafar controversy. So where was PEMRA when we talked about this? Obviously, they should have taken an action. They should have initiated something against those TV shows, those programs or those channels which had taken up this issue and had huge amounts and chunks of publicity and TRPs coming their way, because all is being done for the sake of TRPs, all for the sake of TRPs.
I would want to add one thing over here. I'm a lawyer for PEMRA. I do cases for PEMRA.
Lovely.
And PEMRA does take action on any complaint which is filed with PEMRA. But you see, there are so many violations of the code.
Yeah.
It's happening, one after the other. How much, what's PEMRA? How can PEMRA doesn't have that much workforce that can, just keep on sitting and, noting whatever violation is happening and taking action. I mean,
talking of PEMRA, former chairman Absar Alam was harassed himself once he wanted to initiate an action against one channel, a huge giant that is in the private entity, in the private sector. It's making fortunes out of itself. And when Absar Alam himself wanted to initiate some actions, he actually had to hold a presser and bring about those evidences where he himself was called by unknown anonymous people and harassers and molesters, and he was actually harassed over the phone for initiating that in the first place. So what are we talking about?
We're talking about women's sexual harassment. Completely different. Let's talk about the fact that how can we change society's attitude? Of course, we spoke about children being trained properly in their homes. Now, how is that going to happen? When we talk about governance, we talk about democracy. How can we have a efficient democracy if the people don't know what democracy is? They don't know their basic rights.
Yeah.
They don't know their basic responsibilities. So it's not just about rights, it's also about responsibilities, their duties towards society. Where have we taught our children how to be good citizens? Where is that discourse? Why is it completely missing from our educational system? That is the question. Can you answer it?
There's absolutely nil civic sense when we talk about that. So it's a very far-fetched idea in the first place. And for the democratic roles, when your population, half of your male population, when they are not willing to even lend an ear to their counter gender, I don't know what we're talking about, because
And
it's
also,
a very far-fetched idea then in the first
There's
place.
another problem, Mona, that a number of constituencies prevent women from voting. That is
Yes.
another problem that we have in our society, that women are not allowed to vote. There have been a number of seats or those elections
There's
which were
been a ray
cancelled.
of hope, Waqas, in that matter, because in FATA, this problem that you're talking about was very prevalent.
It's not
But then-
just FATA, by the way. It's across the whole country. Well, you can go to places in interior Sindh where
Yeah.
women will not be allowed to vote.
Well,
Similarly, in Punjab, southern Punjab, you have the same problem.
I'd like to differ slightly on that, because I think interior Sindh is one of those interior district which I think is far more progressive than interior Punjab for a fact, or FATA or Balochistan.
Balochistan
Because-
is completely another story,
Yeah,
because
that's
there
another
women are
domain.
not allowed to come into the public at all.
Absolutely.
There's
yes.
also this is also this issue in certain classes about the women wearing veils in public or going out in public completely dressed in a burqa, so that they do not tempt men who are out there in the streets as well. So can you talk about this aspect? Why is it that that has to be done? And even though women do appear in public wearing the full body covering, a burqa or a chadar or whatever, they are still harassed. So
That
it's
doesn't
not
matter.
it's not about the
That is
clothing.
that is the irony of the matter, that you're not being able to interpret and in the first place understand what your problem is. It's not about how women dress up themselves, it's about the mindset. This meme was shared some days back on social media, where they were showing two photos. One had women dressed up in like one had a bikini clad woman and the other had a burqa clad woman, and men in both the photos were staring at them alike. So it's all about the mindset. It lies in the mindset. That is why we say that you need to start educating your sons before you start educating your women. Before you tell them about morality, before you lecture them and sermon them on how they must dress up and how they must carry themselves and what distance they must maintain from the opposite gender, you must start educating your son. You must start educating your sons in the first place as to there is no difference in women and men when you are at a workplace, when you are in your schools, when you are roaming about in your social fabric.
What do you think about segregation? Because segregation is another aspect that has been used as a excuse for, boys' schools and girls' schools,
Yeah.
and colleges are kept separate. Women and young girls and boys are also made to stay away from each other. Do you think that actually helps society to become better, or do you think it has an inverse effect and it actually breeds more
Yeah.
perversion in society, I would like to say? Is that a fact or no?
I think it's just very opinionated for that matter, because in my personal perspective, I think it's the contrary. It has the contrary effect, because you treat the other gender as an alien then. You haven't been accustomed to them for a good 15 years of your life, and then after a 15 years leap, you suddenly come across the opposite gender and you don't just know where they're coming from. You treat them as aliens. You're in seclusion, you're in isolation, you don't have a basic understanding that they're just like you and there is no distinction and there is no differentiation between a male gender and between the female gender. So I think that has the contrary effect. But then having said that, Waqas, 60% of Pakistani parents would still want to send their children to
Segregated schools.
Yeah, segregated schools, girls' schools or boys' schools, and they think that is the way it should have been.
Well,
I think that initiative has to be taken on governmental schools first and foremost. Our public schools must be co-education, co-ed. That's, I think, where we should start from.
I think that's a good suggestion. Let's talk about the role of women in professions such as yours. Do you think that we have adequate number of women who are also lawyers? We have a large number of women who turn to become doctors. But when we talk about other professions, the major professions that we see women really in are two. One is teaching and medicine. These are the only two sectors where we see a large presence of women in the workforce. But when we talk about, let's say, lawyers, do you think that even within the lawyer community, women feel threatened by their male colleagues? Do you think that there is also that attitude which is denigrating towards women? You know, they're not taken seriously when it comes to, you know, public discourse, when it comes to dealing with, you know, social issues.
Yes, absolutely. Unfortunately, you know, majority of the people in our profession, they hail from, you know, backward areas, from villages, from, you know, suburbs, and, you know, they are the ones which you just mentioned.
What does that mean? I mean, backward areas, because there can be a lot of decent behavior being displayed by people who come from backward areas.
I'm coming to that. And for them, you know, they have that male superiority complex in their mind. This is what I'm trying to mention. It is
I
more
don't think
prevalent.
it has anything to do with the background from where they're coming from.
No, I think it does. You know, if you're
I've seen that male chauvinistic attitude far more in educated elite families than I have seen it in poor rural families.
Well,
there I see women working alongside their men in the fields.
Well, exceptions are always there, but usually, you know, it's more prevalent in the backward areas or villages. Women are, if you compare, if you, you know, draw a comparison.
I think it's a very dogmatic statement you're making here.
Well, this is what I can see. I mean that, and this is what my experience has been. I might be wrong.
All right.
That, you know, and since they hail from such areas, majority of them, so they have that male superiority complex in their minds. And obviously, women do face issues in the courts. They are not, you know, even the clients, they feel that it's not good to go to a lady lawyer because, you know, because law happens to be a field which is more dominated by the men, and there's a general, you know, mindset that a male lawyer is a better lawyer than a female lawyer. In reality, it's not so. I know many female lawyers who are excellent, much better than any male lawyer. So, because of this mindset, yes, this profession happens to have these, you know, have these issues, and it takes a lot of courage and resilience and, you know, hard work for any female lawyer to be successful in this profession, unfortunately.
So I hope that we'll have some more Asma Jahangir characters coming out from the lawyer
inshallah.
community.
I mean, I can probably
we
say
don't see any.
Yes.
I mean, I can probably say my younger sister is a lawyer. She is a barrister and she is working. She goes to the courts, and mashallah, she's doing very well.
Excellent. She had participated against dictators, and she was actually physically tried to
she stood up for women's rights.
She stood up, and
let's talk about
even
women's
took
rights
assaults
overall, because we're almost out of time, Mona. So briefly, do you think we are doing enough to protect women in our country, or do you think
not.
We're not?
We're not.
So,
Certainly
in your
not.
opinion, what are the really essential steps that need to be taken? Just briefly, really basic stuff.
I think we need to begin at home, and once all of us start beginning at home, we are going to produce better citizens, responsible citizens, and that applies to both the genders. And just a little dichotomy that I'd like to mention, I'm aggrieved at the fact that we are the followers of the most liberal, the most enlightened religion in the entire world, that is Islam. And Saudi Arabia, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, it had suppressed, it had oppressed its women all these years until Mohammed bin Salman took an influence from the US counterpart, and he obviously is now liberalizing the entire Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. But then again, it didn't come from the Islamic spirituality and from the Islamic level of liberalization. It came to him through, unfortunately, this US and the Western influence.
That's what you're saying, but according to what Mr. Mohammed bin Salman himself said, that he would like to take Saudi Arabia back to a more enlightened original version of Islam. So he's actually coming from the same point of view that you were talking about.
That's an eyewash.
Well, let's hope that it is the correct direction in which we are going. But we need to actually work here at home. We need to correct our course And I think that the most important thing that we are not paying attention to is education. When you talk about beginning at home,
Yeah.
that home also needs to have educated parents who can teach their children. If the
Educated mothers, for a matter of fact.
mothers, fathers, both, and I think that's where really the problem
You
lies.
need to you need to stop putting halts to female educations. You are
Absolutely.
habitual of not teaching your women. You are habitual of sending the male children to schools. You give them a preference, whereas you don't know the fact that your women and the girls are going to grow up as mothers, and whatever education that they're going to have for themselves are the ones that they're going to impart in turn to their generations to come.
Well, we leave it at that. Thank you so much for taking out the time and sharing your views with PTV World. Well, you heard the conversation, and as always, we urge you to draw your own conclusions from what you've heard, but we hope and pray that we are able to deal with this issue and women are not harassed in public or in private or at the workplace. With that hope and on that note, it's goodbye.